about 2015, I'm okay, I can see some memory loss when I'm talking to him. So I knew something was wrong. So I called my oldest sister, my sister Joyce. I said, have you noticed some memory loss with James? And she was like, yeah. I said, oh, okay. Honestly, by 2017, we couldn't even hold a conversation any longer. So he had early onset Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. He had stopped performing in 2015. So then after that, we knew, him and actually lost another brother 1 month before James.
6 years after James Ingram died, his most shocking secret has finally been revealed. The Grammy winner had been secretly battling early-onset Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease since 2015, while record labels deliberately sabotaged his career to keep him dependent.
Because you may have seen the unsung episode of Switch, and then some of the issues that happened with, Bobby and them, and so.
The real tragedy is that James died from brain cancer 1 month after losing another brother, and his last performance was in 2011, 8 years before his death.
He was having some health issues. The last time him and I performed together was 2011, out here in California. Quincy did this thing called 60 Years of Quincy Jones.
This is how the music industry systematically destroyed the man behind some of the biggest hits of the 1980s. It all started with $50 and a lie. In 1980, James Ingram walked into a studio on Sunset Boulevard to record a demo, believing he was just another session musician trying to make rent. That recording of Just Once would make him famous, but it also sealed his fate as Hollywood's most controlled black artist. What seemed like his biggest break was actually the first link in a chain that would bind him for life. Quincy Jones heard that demo and immediately recognized something the industry could exploit: a black voice that could be marketed to white audiences without threatening their comfort. Ingram's smooth, gospel-trained baritone was perfect for crossover success, but that success would come at the cost of his artistic identity and connection to his own community.
Well, it started on the drums when I was little, okay. And because we had a piano in the house, my oldest brother was phenomenal. We were like, his ear was just like, he would hear someone on the radio and come home and play it.
When Jones called to offer him the opportunity to sing on the Dude album, Ingram initially hung up. He didn't consider himself a real singer. He was just a session musician trying to make rent. But that insecurity made him the perfect candidate for industry manipulation. Desperate artists are easier to control than confident ones. The success of Just Once and 100 Ways launched Ingram into stardom, but it also established a pattern that would define his entire career. He would only be allowed to succeed on white terms. Every subsequent project had to pass through the filter of crossover appeal, stripping away the raw gospel and R&B elements that made his voice authentic. Record executives loved that Ingram could deliver emotional ballads without the vocal gymnastics and raw edge that made other black singers too urban for pop radio. They had found their perfect instrument, a black artist who could generate massive profits while remaining safely palatable to suburban audiences.
Just once, can we find a way to finally make it?
The Grammy nominations that followed, Best New Artist, Best Male R and B Vocal Performance, seemed like validation, but they were really golden handcuffs. Each award ceremony appearance reinforced his image as the safe black artist, the one who wouldn't challenge white listeners or demand too much respect for black musical traditions.
James was playing the guitar and then started picking up piano, so I started picking up the piano. And then I was 16 years old, Sly and Family Stone, they were out, and Larry with all that thumping, you know what I mean?
While his brother Phil was exploring funk and soul with groups that celebrated black musical innovation, James found himself trapped in a completely different world. The industry had decided his role. He would be the black artist who made white people comfortable with R and B, the bridge between cultures that ultimately served only one side. By 1983, when his debut album It's Your Night was released, the pattern was set. The $50 demo had become a career-long contract with the devil. But the industry's control over James Ingram was just beginning. They had bigger plans for their new golden goose, plans that would systematically strip away everything that made him who he was. Once the industry had James Ingram locked into their system, they deployed their most insidious weapon, the crossover trap. Record labels had found their perfect asset in Ingram, a black artist who could dominate pop charts without scaring white audiences. But this crossover success came with a brutal price that would haunt him for the rest of his career. The numbers tell the story of systematic sabotage. Despite generating massive profits and earning 14 Grammy nominations, only a handful of Ingram's singles ever topped the R&B charts. His own record labels were deliberately blocking him from reaching black audiences, terrified that authentic R&B success might damage his carefully manufactured crossover appeal. In 1982, Ingram revealed the daily torture he endured. "It's frustrating at times when I release a record and they tell me it's not black enough for some radio stations. It's like telling the black audience they're not important, like I'm not interested in them." The industry had weaponized his own success against his identity, turning his greatest strength into his greatest weakness. Record executives perfected a cruel strategy that would become the blueprint for controlling future black artists. They marketed Ingram to pop radio while simultaneously telling R&B stations his music was too pop for their format. This deliberate segregation ensured he could never build a loyal base in either community. He was homeless in his own industry, caught between two worlds that both rejected him for opposite reasons. The contrast with white artists was stark and deliberate. Singers like Lionel Richie, who had similar crossover appeal, were never forced to choose between audiences. They dominated both pop and R&B charts simultaneously because the industry saw their success as natural, not threatening.
Baby, come to me. Let me put my arms around.
His biggest hits revealed the trap's cruel efficiency. "Baby, Come to Me" with Patty Austin became a #1 pop hit, but only after being featured on General Hospital, a soap opera watched primarily by white women. The song's success was engineered to bypass black radio entirely, proving that Ingram's crossover appeal was really just musical apartheid with better marketing.
Yeah, like anything, they're gonna always leave out certain things. Because I mean, just my interview alone, I did probably a few hours of a shoot, and then I even got called back and did some more.
But the industry's control went far beyond radio play. They began managing every aspect of his image, telling him which artists he could collaborate with, which sounds he could explore, and which audiences he was allowed to court. Ingram was forbidden from working with artists who were too black or experimenting with sounds that might be labeled urban. Every creative decision had to pass through the filter of white approval. This artistic castration destroyed more than just his music. It severed his connection to the black community that had nurtured his talent. Young black artists stopped seeing him as a role model because he appeared to have abandoned his roots for mainstream success. The truth was far more sinister. His roots had been systematically amputated by an industry that needed him to be profitable, but not powerful. By the mid-1980s, the crossover trap was complete. James Ingram could have massive mainstream success, but only by becoming a ghost in his own career. The industry had learned how to extract maximum profit from black talent, while ensuring that talent could never threaten white musical dominance. But this was only the beginning. With Ingram's identity successfully neutralized, the industry was ready to deploy an even more devastating strategy that would reduce him to a mere voice for hire. With James Ingram's artistic identity successfully neutered by the crossover trap, Hollywood deployed its next phase of control, the collaboration curse. They had discovered the perfect way to extract maximum value from his talent, while ensuring he never built enough independent power to threaten their system. The strategy was deceptively simple but devastatingly effective. Every time Ingram approached solo stardom, executives would strategically pair him with established white artists or safer crossover acts. His greatest hits became someone else's career highlights, while he remained trapped in the background of his own success story.
When Jermaine, like I said, he's the one that got us, got the interest in Motown. At the time, Jermaine Jackson was married to Hazel Gordy, which was Berry Gordy's daughter. Mm-hmm. And so when we came out, he actually heard us and he was just blown away.
The Linda Ronstadt deal in 1987 showed exactly how this collaboration curse operated. Somewhere Out There hit number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and won a Grammy for Song of the Year. Despite Ingram's vocals being just as prominent and emotionally powerful as Ronstadt's, the song was marketed as a Linda Ronstadt single featuring James Ingram. His name appeared in smaller print, his face was hidden in promotional materials, and interviews focused entirely on Ronstadt's career trajectory rather than his artistic contribution. This wasn't accidental oversight, it was calculated exploitation. Record executives had learned that pairing black male vocalists with established white female artists generated massive crossover success while keeping the black artist from accumulating too much individual power or recognition. Ingram was being systematically converted into a human jukebox, his voice launching other people's careers while his own remained stunted.
And even though I know how very far apart we are,
the duet trap followed him relentlessly throughout the decade. Baby, Come to Me with Patty Austin. How Do You Keep the Music Playing with Austin again. What About Me with Kenny Rogers and Kim Carnes. Each collaboration was carefully structured to position Ingram as a featured vocalist rather than a primary artist. He generated hit after hit, but was never allowed to build his own sustainable brand or fan base.
We were like, being silly, let's call the band Switch. And, just as a joke, but then when they got to think about it, said, that makes sense.
The cruelest irony was that while his brother Phil was building genuine creative partnerships with Switch, where all members shared equal billing, ownership, and creative control, James was trapped in a system designed to extract his talent while systematically minimizing his power and agency. Every collaboration was essentially a loan of his voice to someone else's project, with no long-term benefit to his own career. Even his songwriting contributions were subjected to this same exploitative pattern. Despite co-writing massive hits like PYT Pretty Young Thing for Michael Jackson's Thriller album, one of the best-selling albums in music history, Ingram received minimal credit and virtually no promotional benefit from his creative work. His writing was treated as work for hire rather than artistic collaboration. Most devastatingly, Quincy Jones, the man who had discovered Ingram and supposedly championed his career, became complicit in this systematic suppression. While publicly positioning himself as Ingram's mentor and advocate, Jones consistently used Ingram's vocals to enhance other artists' projects rather than building Ingram's solo career. The supposed mentor was actually orchestrating his protege's artistic burial. When I Don't Have the Heart finally gave Ingram his first and only #1 solo hit in 1990, it was both a triumph and a tragedy. He was nearly 40 years old and had spent an entire decade as the world's most successful backup singer. The song's massive success proved he could dominate as a solo artist when given proper support and promotion. But by then, it was far too late. The collaboration curse had worked exactly as designed: maximum profit extraction with minimum power accumulation. But the industry wasn't finished with James Ingram yet. Having successfully turned him into a voice for hire, they now prepared to deploy their most insidious weapon, making him completely invisible while continuing to profit from his talent. Having successfully trapped James Ingram in the collaboration curse, the industry deployed its most psychologically devastating weapon: systematic visual erasure. They had perfected a new form of racism that allowed them to profit massively from black talent while ensuring white audiences never had to confront the humanity behind that talent. The visual erasure campaign began immediately after establishing Ingram as their controlled asset. Despite being the lead vocalist on Quincy Jones's breakthrough album, The Dude, Ingram's photograph appeared nowhere on the album artwork. His name was buried in small print while Jones's image dominated the cover. The message was unmistakable. Black voices could generate enormous profits, but black faces might scare away the suburban customers who drove record sales.
Certain band members where one or two people might play multiple, like Prince, he was a solo artist, but he played guitar, keyboards, sang, lead, background, all of that. And it was unique to have more than one person in a band that did that. That's why.
Record executives had discovered they could market Ingram's music to white audiences far more effectively by completely hiding his visual presence. Radio listeners fell in love with his voice, but promotional campaigns were carefully designed to avoid showing them who was actually singing. This strategy worked because it allowed fans to project their own racial assumptions onto the music, maintaining their comfort while maximizing corporate profits. The systematic dehumanization became more obvious with each album release. It's Your Night featured abstract artwork instead of his photograph. Never Felt So Good showed only shadows and silhouettes. Even when his face occasionally appeared, it was heavily stylized, softly lit, and designed to obscure rather than celebrate his identity. Meanwhile, white artists with far less talent and commercial success were getting their faces prominently featured on everything from album covers to magazine spreads, becoming integral to their brand identity. The music video erasure was even more brutal and revealing. In an era when MTV was becoming the primary driver of music success, Ingram's videos were either completely non-existent or featured him as a barely visible background figure in his own songs. When Somewhere Out There became a massive international hit, the promotional video focused entirely on animated sequences from An American Tail, completely eliminating both Ingram and Linda Ronstadt from the visual narrative of their own success.
So now it's singing, keyboards is second, then drums and percussion is third, and then bass is last.
The psychological damage from this systematic erasure was immediate and devastating. Ingram began internalizing the industry's message that his talent was valuable, but his identity was not. In interviews, he consistently displayed the self-deprecating humility that the industry demanded from black artists. "I knew I couldn't sing," he would say repeatedly, despite possessing one of the most distinctive and commercially successful voices in popular music. The name recognition problem became Ingram's career-defining curse, and it wasn't accidental, as he admitted in interviews. "The trouble is, people hear my songs and they say, 'I didn't know you sang it.'" This wasn't the result of poor marketing or oversight. It was the deliberate outcome of marketing strategies specifically designed to separate his voice from his identity, allowing white audiences to consume black talent without acknowledging its source. Record labels had perfected a system where they could generate enormous profits from black creativity, while ensuring white audiences never had to confront the reality of that creativity's origin. Ingram's voice could soundtrack white weddings, romantic moments, and life celebrations, but his face couldn't be associated with those intimate experiences because his visible blackness might complicate the fantasy. By the 1990s, the marketing machine had achieved its ultimate goal. Ingram had become the most successful, invisible man in music history. His voice was everywhere, generating millions in revenue, but he himself was nowhere to be seen. The industry had extracted maximum value from his talent while providing minimum acknowledgement of his humanity. But even this wasn't enough for an industry that viewed artists as disposable resources. Having successfully made Ingram invisible while continuing to profit from his work, they were about to abandon him entirely when he needed them most. The man who had made them millions was about to discover how the entertainment industry treats its legends when they're no longer useful. By 2015, the entertainment industry's systematic exploitation of James Ingram had achieved every goal they'd set. They had trapped him in collaborations, erased his visual presence, and extracted millions from his talent while keeping him powerless. But when Ingram began showing the first signs of early-onset Alzheimer's disease, the industry revealed its most heartless truth. Once an artist stops generating profit, they become completely expendable. The abandonment was swift and total. While James Ingram was secretly battling the early stages of cognitive decline, the music industry that had made millions from his voice simply walked away. No major label offered support, no entertainment executives checked on his welfare, and no industry organizations provided assistance for his mounting medical bills.
Yeah.
So it's four of us left. And so, you know, if I'm the youngest, then the oldest one is in his 70s. So
The cruelty was breathtaking in its completeness. Artists who had built entire careers using Ingram's songwriting and vocals suddenly had no time for the man who had made their success possible. Michael Jackson's estate continued generating enormous profits from PYT, Pretty Young Thing, which Ingram co-wrote, but never acknowledged his deteriorating condition or offered any financial assistance for his care. The Ingram family watched in horror as James became increasingly confused and unable to perform the basic functions that had defined his life. By 2017, he couldn't hold coherent conversations, but the industry that had controlled every aspect of his career for decades offered no assistance with his care. The same executives who had micromanaged his song choices, collaboration partners, and public image were nowhere to be found when he desperately needed genuine human support. His conspicuous absence from the 2018 Quincy Jones tribute concert in Los Angeles revealed the devastating extent of his decline to industry insiders. Patty Austin was forced to perform their iconic hit, Baby Come to Me, alone, singing both parts while the audience remained completely unaware that Ingram was at home, unable to remember the song that had made him famous decades earlier. The medical bills were financially devastating for a family that had never achieved the wealth that should have accompanied such massive commercial success. Early-onset Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, and eventually brain cancer required round-the-clock specialized care that insurance couldn't fully cover. The man who had generated hundreds of millions in revenue for record labels was left to struggle with medical bankruptcy, while his former collaborators continued touring and profiting from their shared hits.
and I was just kind of done with groups. And but I got asked to become the lead singer of Tower Power. And I called them. I mean, when they called me, I said, if this had been, you know, another time in my life,
Yeah.
but I was done with groups.
Industry organizations that loudly claimed to support veteran artists were conspicuously absent when one of their most successful contributors needed help. The Recording Academy, which had nominated Ingram 14 times and awarded him 2 Grammys, offered no assistance programs for aging artists struggling with dementia. The same institution that had celebrated his contributions during his healthy, profitable years completely abandoned him when he needed support most. The cover-up extended throughout entertainment media, revealing the industry's collective complicity in discarding inconvenient artists. While gossip magazines obsessed over celebrity health scares and addiction struggles, Ingram's devastating illness was treated as a private family matter. The same publications that had profited from covering his career success showed absolutely no interest in documenting his tragic decline. Most heartbreakingly, Quincy Jones, who had built much of his legendary producer reputation on Ingram's vocals, maintained complete public silence about his protege's condition. The mentor who had launched Ingram's career was apparently unwilling to use his enormous industry influence to secure proper care for the artist who had made him millions. The cruelest irony was that Ingram's music continued generating substantial royalties even as his mind deteriorated. Streaming services, radio stations, and licensing companies kept paying into accounts he could no longer access or understand. His voice was still making money for everyone involved, but the man behind that voice was slowly disappearing while no one in the industry seemed to care. This systematic abandonment set the stage for the final betrayal, an ending so cruel it would expose the entertainment industry's complete lack of humanity when dealing with the artists who built their fortunes. The health crisis cover-up had revealed the entertainment industry's true character, but James Ingram's final years would expose something even more sinister. An industry so callous that they would allow one of their greatest assets to die in obscurity while continuing to profit from his legacy. In his last years, Ingram faced the ultimate betrayal that connected every previous exploitation into one devastating finale. The industry that had controlled and profited from his entire career simply pretended he no longer existed. While his songs continued generating millions in royalties through streaming services and licensing deals, the man who created them was left to battle 3 devastating diseases in complete obscurity.
And I brought that up again.
Okay.
The third time they brought it up, trying to say something about Bobby, I said, Bobby is no different than like an Elvis Presley, a David Ruffin. I mean, some great talent that had some drug issues and had some other issues that he was dealing with.
The timing of his decline revealed the industry's coldest calculation yet. Ingram stopped performing in 2015, the exact same year streaming services began generating massive new revenue streams from catalog music. His classic hits were earning more money than ever through Spotify, Apple Music, and digital downloads. But none of that dramatically increased income translated into care for the artist who had created the music. The industry had learned to profit from artists even after discarding them. His family watched helplessly as James deteriorated from an articulate, creative genius into someone who couldn't remember conversations or recognize familiar faces. The early-onset Alzheimer's progressed rapidly, compounded by Parkinson's disease that robbed him of the physical coordination that had made him such a dynamic performer. By 2017, the man who had sung some of the most emotionally nuanced ballads in music history could no longer hold coherent conversations with his own family. The medical bills systematically destroyed the family's finances, revealing how the industry's decades of exploitation had prevented Ingram from accumulating real wealth. Despite decades of hit songs and Grammy recognition, he had never achieved the kind of financial security that could support long-term care for multiple devastating illnesses. The industry that had made millions from his voice offered no assistance with the mounting costs of specialized care, experimental treatments, or even basic comfort measures. Entertainment media, which had celebrated his every career milestone during his profitable prime years, completely ignored his tragic decline. The same publications that had featured him on covers and in major interviews showed no interest in documenting the reality facing aging artists with degenerative diseases. His suffering was deemed too depressing for audiences who preferred celebrity gossip and scandal over genuine human tragedy.
We're back together and doing stuff and, performing and just having fun.
Yeah.
Without all those other issues, you know what I mean?
So,
But no, I never worked with it. I love Tower Power.
The final insult came in the form of brain cancer, diagnosed in his last years when he was already weakened by Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. The triple diagnosis was effectively a death sentence, but even then, the industry that had shaped his entire adult life remained completely silent. No major fundraising efforts were organized, no benefit concerts were planned, and no industry legends stepped forward to help the man who had contributed to all their successes. Quincy Jones, who had discovered Ingram and built much of his own legendary reputation on their collaborations, eventually issued a heartfelt tribute after Ingram's death. But during the 4 crucial years of illness, when practical help was desperately needed, Jones was notably absent. The mentor-protege relationship that had defined both their careers apparently had an expiration date tied directly to commercial viability. The cruelest irony of all was that Ingram died just 1 month after losing another brother, leaving the family devastated by multiple tragedies while completely alone. Phil Ingram, who courageously revealed these details in interviews, described watching his famous brother disappear piece by piece while the world that had celebrated him simply moved on to newer, more profitable talent. When James Ingram finally passed away on January 29, 2019, at age 66, the entertainment industry suddenly rediscovered his importance with disgusting hypocrisy. Social media filled with tributes from artists who had been completely silent during his illness. Record executives praised his contributions while continuing to profit from his catalog. The Recording Academy issued statements celebrating his legacy while having offered no support whatsoever during his decline. The final betrayal was complete, connecting every exploitation from that first $50 demo to his lonely death. James Ingram had been used, controlled, erased, abandoned, and ultimately discarded by an industry that viewed him as nothing more than a profit center rather than a human being. His voice will live forever in the songs that defined romantic music for millions. But the man behind that voice died alone and forgotten by the very system that had made him a star. This is how Hollywood treats its legends when they're no longer useful, with empty tributes and hollow praise, while the real tragedy unfolds in private, away from the cameras and the profits. Anyway, that's it for the video, folks. Bye.